Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Garodnick, Chair of the City Planning Commission and Director of the Department of City Planning. Welcome to today's review session of the City Planning Commission. Today's date is September 23rd. We're joined today by Commissioners Benjamin, Cerullo, Crowell, Dweck, Gold, Kermani, Mann, Marin, Osorio, and Rampersad. Welcome to all of you. Before we get to our agenda today, I just want to go over some recent news related to the Department of City Planning's work. Last week, City Planning and the Department of Small Business Services, as well as the Economic Development Corporation, launched the New York City Industrial Plan, a comprehensive framework to support the development of industrial businesses and jobs. While New York's industrial areas face 21st century challenges and opportunities, they are saddled with 20th century rules. This represents a great opportunity to bring a fresh and thoughtful approach to industrial planning that supports businesses, their workers, and people who live nearby. Our public engagement for this plan will start with a multilingual survey and outreach to a wide range of stakeholders across New York City, including industrial businesses, service providers, advocates, those who work in industrial businesses, as well as residents in the surrounding areas. To get involved, please visit nyc.gov/industrial plan. From one citywide plan to another, I hope everybody will read my op-ed in the Queens Daily Eagle on City of Yes for housing opportunity. In the piece, I made efforts to clear up some common misperceptions surrounding the proposal and discuss what it actually does, allow for a little more housing across New York City without burdening any one neighborhood. Finally, some personnel news. I'm very proud to announce the appointment of Lynn Zhang and Kathy Ko to respectively serve as the Director and Deputy Director of the Department of City Planning's Queens office. Lynn Zhang began her planning career with the City of New York in 2010 at the office of the Manhattan Borough President and has since held managerial roles at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development and the School Construction Authority. Kathy Ko joined the Queens Office of City Planning in 2014 after a career in the nonprofit sector focused on transportation equity policy and community organizing. Over her decade at DCP, she has played several key roles, including borough planner, borough certification manager, and team leader. These two stellar planners have the right mix of initiative, innovation, passion, and planning know-how to lead the Queens office during an exceptionally busy time in the office and across the agency. So congratulations to both of them. Moving right along to today's review session agenda, we'll start with several zoning actions for the Queens Future project, including demapping around 25 acres of parkland currently used as an asphalt parking lot in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park. Queens Future is a 3.7 million square foot development with a gaming facility, music hall, convention, and meeting space, a 2,300 room hotel, and restaurant and retail space as proposed. It would also create around 20 acres of new redeveloped public park space and improve pedestrian, bicycle, and roadway access. To be clear, this application is distinct from other required approvals for the project, in particular state legislation for parkland alienation and the gaming facility licensing process. Although it only serves as a parking lot, the space that will serve as the location for this project is technically mapped as parkland today. Queens Future itself would still need to go through the state-defined siting process, which includes required approval by a 6-person community advisory committee, which includes representatives from the mayor, borough president, and local council member, among others. From there, we will go to East Midwood for an application by the New York Community Hospital of Brooklyn. The hospital is looking to demap a small portion of Avenue O between Bedford Avenue and Kings Highway to develop an infectious disease isolation unit, adding around 1,500 square feet of community facility space to the existing hospital building. The commission will also learn about a proposed conversion of vacant office space to residential in the world-renowned Flatiron Building at 175 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. This would lead to the creation of nearly 40 new homes at this landmark just north of Madison Square Park. I should note here that one way City of Yes would help tackle our housing crisis is by making it easier for empty, non-residential buildings to convert to housing, not just in Manhattan, but across the city. We'll also look at council modifications regarding an application for around 35 new homes at 3117 12th Street in Astoria, Queens. and a proposal to allow a ground floor medical office at 250 86th Street in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. After our review session wraps up, we'll also hold a special public meeting to vote on 962, 972 Franklin Avenue in Brooklyn. I know there are strong feelings about this development as we heard at our public hearing, and I'm happy to say that I believe we have reached a compromise that achieves our shared goals. I'll have more to say on that later this afternoon. But for now, let's get to it. Sarah, floor is yours.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Planning Commission Review Session for Monday, September 23rd, 2024. The time is 1:13 p.m. and a quorum is present. The first item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map amendment and city map amendment in Queens Joint Interest 81. Our presenter is Stephen Johnson.
Hello, Stephen.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by Queens Future LLC for a city map amendment and a zoning map amendment to facilitate the development of a gaming facility and associated uses located in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park in Queens, New York. This project is to map and demap parkland and streets, and a city map amendment to map a C84 zoning district, commercial zoning district. I will be showing some illustrative drawings of a gaming facility and parking structures and parkland, new landscape parkland. That would be part of a gaming application to be submitted to the state next summer. The Queens Future applicant is seeking one of the 3 available commercial gaming licenses that will be awarded by the end of next year, 2025. I will be discussing the gaming license process and schedule later in the presentation, as well as the gaming facility text amendment, which was the first step in the gaming process for the City of New York. Okay. So Queens Future LLC is the applicant for the project. The City of New York Parks Department is also a co-applicant for the project, as they are on all map change actions related to parkland. In this presentation, when I refer to the applicant, I will be referring to the Queens Future LLC. So there are 2 proposed land use actions. The first is in 4 parts. The first is being to demap parkland corresponding to the area of the proposed gaming facility and related entertainment and commercial uses. This demap parkland area would be leased to the Queens Future applicant. The second is to demap portions of streets within the existing boundary of Grand Central Parkway, which is related to vehicular access into the proposed development. This area would also be leased to the Queens Future applicant. Third is to map some new streets corresponding to a relocated westbound Grand Central Parkway ramp and to map new parkland corresponding to park improvements within the existing boundary of Grand Central Parkway. Now, the second action is a zoning map amendment to map a portion of the development site as a C84 commercial zoning district. Now, the development site is within Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, but is not located in any specific community district. Because of this, the application will be referred to multiple community boards abutting the park, including 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The proposed land use actions, in conjunction with the recently adopted gaming facility text amendment, would allow the state to consider a gaming application by the applicant for one of the gaming facility licenses on this particular development site. The applicant must also go to the state to demap the approximately 25 acres of parkland that would facilitate the proposed commercial development and roadway changes. The state legislature must authorize the alienation of parkland, which will be brought forth to the state in the first half of 2025. The applicant has stated that if they are not awarded one of these 3 available gaming licenses, they would not pursue the project and the development site would remain as is in its existing condition. So here's the agenda for the presentation. There's about 49 slides that I'll be going through, starting with the gaming facility text amendment, which was adopted by the City Council on April 18th, 2024. This amendment permitted the gaming use for the first time in the city and allows up to 3 gaming facilities in the city. Previously, this was not a permitted use in the zoning resolution. Now, the text amendment does not allow any future casinos or gaming facilities that are not related to the specific state gaming commission process. And these are only for these 3 available licenses. An approval by the Gaming Commission via the Gaming Facility Location Board shall be deemed to have satisfied all applicable regulations in the zoning resolution. So the New York State Gaming Commission regulates and oversees gaming facilities, casinos, and racetracks, and in a statewide referendum in 2013 approved 7 new commercial casinos. Subsequently, 4 licenses were awarded in upstate New York, and those facilities are now up and running. The Gaming Commission created the Gaming Facility Location Board to oversee the process of awarding the remaining 3 licenses, and in January of 2023, they issued a request for applications to develop and operate a gaming facility in the downstate region, which includes New York City, Long Island, Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland counties. Now, they also established a new siting and review process, which includes a community advisory committee. These CACs will be created to review each gaming facility application based on the site's location and consist of 6 members or appointees by the following elected officials that are listed on the slide: the governor, the mayor of New York City, state senator, the state assembly member, the city council member, and the borough president. Each CAC is subject to the open meetings law, and they must hold public hearings, issue a finding establishing support, and have a 2/3 vote approval by the 6 members to advance an application. Because gaming was not permitted in New York City, the use was previously not permitted, and because the tight schedule laid out by the Gaming Facility Location Board, the city proposed a text amendment to permit the use, acknowledge the CAC public review process for each application, and enable the city to move as quickly and efficiently as possible within city resources without having to go through an entire ULURP and environmental review for each casino proposal. So this map shows the 9 gaming facility proposals in New York City, and I believe there's 1 in Long Island and 1 in Westchester. So we have 5 on this map in Manhattan. There's 1 in the Bronx, 1 in Brooklyn, and 2 in Queens, which includes the one we're here today for, the Queens Future. Now, the 4 highlighted projects on the slide represent the projects that have additional actions that are not covered by the Gaming Facility Text Amendment. And this includes Queens Future, which has the mapping actions, and the alienation of parkland, which requires the state legislation. So the 3 other highlighted projects up there are scheduled to be certified this winter. This is necessary for all 4 projects so they can meet the Gaming Facility Location Board's requirement that all gaming proposals have local zoning approval. So the Gaming Board recently released some updated information on their schedule. As we can see on this slide here, they are proposing that the gaming applications to be submitted to them by July 27th of next year, which also starts the CAC review process for those applications. As I said, each individual CAC will start holding public hearings and get feedback and testimony on the applications. And then the CACs will vote on the applications by September 30th, 2025. And they have, if it's to advance, they have to approve it by a 2/3 majority. So all approved applications would then be submitted to the Gaming Facility Location Board to review. That means the board could get anywhere from 0 to 9 applications from New York City. As I mentioned earlier, if Queens Future is not awarded a gaming license, then they are not moving forward with any development outlined in this application today. So moving on to the area overview. So we have it looks pretty good up there. I recommend looking there. To give you some context of the project area, we have this tax map. I know it's a little difficult to see the thin colored lines, but we will be zooming in on each one of those areas later in the presentation. You can see the tax lot in yellow and the red outline of the proposed development, the main development site A, which is the casino and hotel use, where Shea Stadium used to be located. So for some historical context, for decades up through the early 20th century, the development site was an industrial dumping ground and landfill. It was later paved and served as a parking lot for the 1939 World's Fair. In 1961, the City of New York and the New York Mets entered into an agreement providing for the development and operation of a 56,000-seat stadium on the site of the parking lot. So So the state enacted legislation that authorized the city to enter an agreement for the use of the stadium and the surrounding parking lots. And the site was leased to the Mets. And Shea Stadium opened on April 17, 1964, which you can see with the photo on the right, which is opening day. So in that photo where Shea Stadium is, an area further west where it says Grand Central Parkway, that's approximately the location of the main development site A for the gaming facility. So in 1967, the site with the stadium, parking lots and the fairgrounds to the south were established as Flushing Meadows Corona Park. And in 2006, the city and the Mets redeveloped the site and constructed a new stadium named Citi Field in the parking lot adjacent to Shea and demolished Shea Stadium, as you can see on the left, with the two stadiums, one in operation and the one being built. Now we have an image of the site today. This is the existing conditions with the stadium and the asphalt parking lots surrounding the stadium. Shea Road, Roosevelt, Beaver Way. Okay, so we have the area map here. This shows the development site outlined in red with the northern section in the northern section of the park. Willets Point is to the east, Corona is to the west, Flushing Bay and the public marina is to the north, and the Billie Jean King Tennis Center and the rest of the park is to the south. A substantial portion of the surrounding area is occupied by major roadways and transportation and utility-related uses. The development site is bordered to the north by Northern Boulevard and the Whitestone Expressway. The Grand Central Parkway is to the west, the Van Wyck is to the east, and the New York City Transit Yard and Bus Depot is next to Roosevelt Island and the number 7 subway link, which is in the pink M11 district on the map. Now, I also just wanted to briefly mention the Willets Point Special District, which is east of the development site and is mapped as a C44 commercial district. The area has long been a home to a mix of small, low-scale, auto-related and light industrial uses, and as you know, Willets Point area is planned for a multi-phase mixed-use development. Construction of Phase 1 began in December of 2023 and includes affordable housing and a new public school, and then Phase 2 will include a soccer stadium opening in about 3 years, more affordable housing, and a 250-room hotel. So now moving on to our existing conditions photos. So here we have the first image is the existing conditions again of the project area with the 4 development sites labeled A, B, C, and D. You can see that the site is ringed by Shea Road, Seaver Way, and Roosevelt Avenue. The vast majority of the site is mapped parkland with open surface parking lots. There are 7,423 parking spaces for visitors to Citi Field and up to 1,795 spaces south of Roosevelt Avenue in one of those C areas next to the subway line for commuter parking on business days. All of the existing parking spaces existing for the Mets will be replaced in the proposed development. There will be parking on all of the development sites, but C and D, development sites C's and D, will only be parking spaces with a parking structure. Site B will be parking with some commercial uses, and Site A is the main development site for the casino and associated uses. So we have 2 images here, Seaver Way and Shea Road. The first is looking southwest at the surface parking lot with Citi Field in the back. This is the location for parking structure D, while photo 2 is looking west along Shea Road. In this image, we're moving west from the previous images along Shea Road, and we have a view of Boat Basin Place, which is looking south at Citi Field to the left, and the massive surface parking lot on the right, which is proposed to be the location of the casino and hotel, and a new park, redeveloped parkland, which I have an illustration for later in the presentation. So if you turn around 180 degrees from the previous photo on Boat Basin Place, you have this image, which is looking north at the elevated Whitestone toward Flushing Bay, with Boat Basin Place running underneath. This is the location for a new street and replacement on-ramp for the westbound Grand Central Parkway. This is required due to the design of the proposed development, which impacts the existing Grand Central Parkway ramp. So this is the other side of the development, of the proposed on-ramp. You can see Citi Field on the left. The on-ramp, proposed on-ramp and street would run right next to the existing boat base in place underneath the Whitestone. Here, on the left, we have an image of the front of the proposed development site A from Shea Road. Photo 2 shows an area that is proposed to be new parkland that is currently mapped as street from the Grand Central Parkway. This is also the area that is supposed to be one of the 2 elevated ramps access points going into development site A. So here we have the first photo. It's looking east straight across the main development site A, and you can see Citi Field in the background. This is where the main entrance and facade of the development would be. Photo 2 is the western end of the development on Shea Road looking north. A sliver of Grand Central Parkway on the left of that photo, photo 2, would be mapped for the second of 2 vehicle bridges providing access into the development site. So these images are of development site C, which are, as you can see, existing parking lots. Photo 1 is looking westward, while photo 2 is looking more eastward. In both images, you can see the structure of the elevated 7 subway line in the background. Now, between the two sites where these photos were taken is the Pastoral Bridge, which is the elevated wooden bridge that leads to the Billie Jean King Tennis Center and the rest of the park in the south. And here we have an image of the Pastoral, which spans over the parking lots, the rail yard, the bus depot, and connects the southern portion of Flushing Meadows, Corona Park to the MTA subway station and Citi Field. These 2 photos are from Roosevelt Avenue underneath the subway station. Photo 1 is showing development site C from a different angle, and photo 2 is 180 degrees from that photo, looking at, in the other direction, looking at Citi Field at the location of development site B, which is currently an open surface parking lot, and that development site will have some commercial uses as well as a parking structure. With Citi Field directly behind the viewpoint of this photo, this shows, again, development site A looking west. And I will show a later illustration showing in the presentation what that's going to be looking like. But this area would be redeveloped into a new green space and park between the gaming facility and Citi Field, and at its widest point would be 390 feet in width. And our last image here is of an elevated view from the subway train at the development site. Now we're moving on to the project descriptions of the different development sites. So the proposed development would be a major new entertainment, commercial, and recreation complex with a maximum of approximately 3.7 million square feet. The development would also include structured parking facilities with up to 13,750 total spaces, and at least 20 acres of the existing parking lots would be improved as public park space. As you can see in this rendering, you can see all the green space. I think it adds up to about 25 acres. And again, here we have the 4 development sites, A, B, C, and D. So first, let's start with A. Development site A will be proposed to be 2.1 million square feet of hotel space with up to 2,300 rooms, 350 square feet of gaming facility space, and 93,000 of gaming back of house uses. 290,000 square feet of music hall space with approximately 5,600 seats, nearly 200,000 square feet of restaurant space, 150,000 square feet of convention space, and about 150,000 square feet of hotel amenity space. Again, and another 100,000 square feet of retail space. There will be parking on the first 2 levels of the primary building and a separate 6-level parking structure with 5,500 parking spaces, up to that many parking spaces. Now we're moving on to Site B. You can see Site B at the bottom there, right in front of the subway station. This is located between Citi Field and the subway station, and it would help support Citi Field visitors and local visitors and residents. There's going to be a proposed food hall and retail spaces, as well as office space. That would be ancillary support spaces for Site B uses and the stadium uses. There's going to be a proposed community facility space, which would provide flexible meeting rooms and event spaces for community-based organizations, Site B would include a parking structure with up to 825 spaces at an elevation of 114 feet and also 74 surface parking spaces. And here is one of the renderings of Site B at the elevated height of the subway station. You can see that the food hall is called the Taste of Queens. You can see it clearly in that slide, and how they've connected that into a new frontage into the subway station. So moving on to Site C and D. So development D is to the north of Citi Field, and is proposed to be developed solely as a 12-story parking garage at an elevation of up to 142 feet. Site C has two sites, kind of an east site and a west site. It's divided by the passerelle in this illustration, which of course leads to the tennis center and the subway. The eastern site C is proposed to have 10 floors of a parking structure with 2,901 parking spaces and a height of approximately 100 feet. The western site will be surface parking with 250 spaces, and they also are proposing to have some redeveloped green space. You can see some soccer fields, some recreation fields there next to that space also. So parking for the Mets will be available in development site C and D, and VIP parking is in development site B and will be operated by the Mets as it is today. The Mets parking will also provide up to 4,000 spaces for the soccer games when that's up and running. The schedule for the soccer games and the Mets baseball games will be coordinated so they don't coincide at the same time and create transportation woes for everyone. Development site A is parking for the casino and is available for the casino year-round. So we have an illustration of our massing here and the different massings for the development. As you can see in the hotel and casino site, the tallest building would be up to 343 feet. There's another building at 282, and the different elevations around the area. And then for context, you can see that the Citi Field, the highest elevation, is at 212 feet. So overall improvements and public parks. So one of the main features of the proposed development, as we can see in this illustration, is the redevelopment of the public park spaces that would include up to 25 acres of new landscaped and programmed public park space on land that today is mapped as a park but is used for parking. It's asphalt. The final design and programming for this area is subject to review and approval by the Parks Department. The proposed lawn would include a 10-acre space in the center of the development with a 1-acre lawn and outdoor event space, gardens, movable seating and tables, picnic areas, and tree-lined promenades. South of Roosevelt Avenue, as I mentioned earlier, is a proposed 3.8-acre park space that would be improved with active recreation uses, racket sports, soccer fields, playgrounds, etc. A large passive recreation area would also be provided at the northwestern corner of the site, and another open space area would be located at Seaver Way that would be called a flexible plaza area to support events throughout the year, such as farmers markets. The applicant would also be required to maintain the public park space in accordance with park standards, and there are 4 proposed public restrooms within the park area. Now, the proposal would also include comprehensive transit, bike, and pedestrian improvements, including improvements to the Mets Willets Point 7 subway station. Elevators would be constructed between the station mezzanine and street level and between the mezzanine and platforms. Fare control areas and corridors would be redesigned and expanded, and the station would be fully ADA accessible. The applicant also proposes a suite of bike and pedestrian improvements, including along Roosevelt, Shea Road, and near Stadium Place North, and under the Whitestone Expressway to create protected bike lanes and connections to the north, east, and south of the development site, and a shared path going into the future development site at Willets Point. The pedestrian improvements will improve connections between the southern portions of the park and the Flushing Bay Promenade on the northern boundary of the site. Development site at Ped and Bike Bridge would replace the existing at-grade crosswalk along a ramp for the Grand Central Parkway, which will enhance safety, and another Ped Bridge would be provided over Shea Road and connect to protected bike lanes and pedestrian links. New lighting is also proposed underneath the elevated. Roadway improvements include the relocation of the on-ramp to the westbound Grand Central. The existing on-ramp is immediately adjacent to the development site and a short distance from the off-ramp that leads to Shea Road, creating a substandard weaving section according to the applicant. Other roadway safety improvements include the realignment of Shea Road to intersect with Seaver Way at 35th instead of 34th, and a number of other roadway improvements along Olmsted. And finally, for this slide is the issue of resiliency, which is central to the proposed development. So replacing impermeable surface parking with landscaped open spaces and floodplain compliant buildings would reduce stormwater runoff, enhance biodiversity, and mitigate the heat island effect. The first occupiable floor in development sites A and B would be designed at an elevation of 20 feet, which is 12 feet above site elevation, to incorporate possible future revisions to the base flood elevation. The uses in this building located at or below the design flood elevation would be restricted to parking and loading. And all of the new buildings would provide rooftop solar panels and softscape. So moving on, we're going into the actions now. We have the map change and the map amendment, and we're going to start with the city map change. So as I mentioned before, a large majority of the site is mapped parkland. Altogether, approximately 25 acres of parkland would be demapped to facilitate the proposed commercial development and roadway changes. The demapped park area mainly follows the footprint of development site A. The demapping area would extend to include driveways and ramps that access development site A, and this demapped area would remain owned by the city and ground leased to the applicant. The proposal includes the relocation of a ramp to the Grand Central Parkway. A portion of the relocated ramp extends into current mapped parkland, and these areas would remain owned by the city and would be managed as part of the state arterial system. As a matter of state law, the state legislature must authorize the alienation of parkland. Now, the second element is the demapping of streets. Altogether, approximately 1.2 acres of street would be demapped. As part of the site access improvements, a ramp would extend from Shea Road to a primary entrance to the development site A located along its western facade. A portion of this ramp would be extending into the current boundary of the Grand Central Parkway, which would have to be demapped as street. And like the rest of the development site A, that area is occupied by this portion of the ramp would remain owned by the city and be ground leased to the applicant. The third element is the mapping of street that corresponds to the Grand Central Parkway. This ramp to the westbound Grand Central Parkway would be relocated at the portions that extend into existing map parkland and would be mapped as park, and these same portions would be mapped as street. The relocated ramp would be owned by the city. And finally, the mapping of a small portion of parkland extends into an area of the Grand Central Parkway. This would be demapped as street, and this would this would now become part of the city parkland. So we have a couple illustrations to walk you through this. So we see development site A here, which is in the peachy color. This is the footprint of the 25.11 acre parkland demapping. The two horn structures coming out of the development are the proposed ramps, access points in and out of the building, the development site for the vehicles. One is proposed to be an in-ramp and one is proposed to be an out-ramp. This is going to be at an elevation of approximately 20 feet going into the main entry point for the site. Now, the two small areas at the top by the Whitestone Expressway, that's the new relocated on-ramp, which you can see in that peach color. So that's part of the area that's going to be demapped as parkland. So just zooming in on the ramps into the space. This is a close-up of those two casino vehicular access bridges over Shea Road. The existing condition is on the left. You can see it with the white dotted line superimposed. There's a 2D rendering with the orange color, which is the elevation, and Shea Road remains parkland below it. This is approximately 0.27 acres. Moving on from the park demapping to street demapping. The areas in lavender here, you can see the two areas there are mapped streets for the Grand Central Parkway. The lower one is labeled entrance ramp, is for new vehicular access. That's the one in ramp. It's approximately 0.66 acres. The second one at the north is proposed to be new parkland, but it has to be demapped first. That's 0.77 acres. And this is just a close-up of the vehicle entrance ramp. As you can see it in the existing conditions, in the greenery, in the landscaping of the GCP, and the purple is the area to be demapped. Moving on, onto the mapping of a street. So this is a mapping of 0.66 acres of street related to the relocation of that Grand Central Parkway on-ramp. This replacement is required by the state because the development is removing an existing ramp. So you can see that in this purplish blue color on the westbound ramp winding its way underneath the Whitestone Expressway next to Boat Basin Place, which I pointed out in the existing condition photos. The area outlined in red is proposed, that's already existing street, so that doesn't have to be touched or demapped, it's existing. So moving on to a close-up of that relocated ramp, you can see it going underneath the Whitestone next to Boat Basin Place and connecting to a roadway there. So this illustration shows the new map parking. The area was shown as demapped street on slide 39, and the area is proposed to be the new 0.77 acre park mapping in the light green. It's a little bit difficult to differentiate, so I drew an arrow in to that little half circle-ish, half oval space. This would be a new landscape park. So moving on to the zoning map amendment, the second action. The applicant is seeking a zoning map amendment to map a C84 zoning district on a portion of the development site. The C84 district would be mapped on the property bounded by Northern Boulevard to the north and a specific line 970 feet parallel with southwesterly of 126 to the east, Roosevelt Avenue to the south, and the Grand Central Parkway to the west. This area encompasses development site A as well as the private ramps and driveways accessing development site A. A C84 commercial district permits commercial uses with a maximum FAR of 5, and no residential use is allowed. Now, the applicant is seeking a license to permit a gaming facility, and as part of the license application process, the CACs and the Gaming Facility Location Board will review the design and layout of the proposed facility. The proposed map amendment to create the C84, as well as the map change, would allow the gaming facility text amendment to apply to the development site, and pursuant to the gaming facility text amendment, if the Gaming Commission issues a license to operate a gaming facility within the C84 district, it shall be deemed to have satisfied all applicable zoning regulations in the ZR, if approved by the CACs and then awarded by the Gaming Facilities Location Board. Again, I just want to reiterate, if the applicant is not awarded a gaming facility license, the alteration maps for the city map change described above will not be filed. The development site would remain mapped parkland used as surface parking, and the zoning map amendment would not take effect. So moving on to our map change here, we have the existing on the left, and as I mentioned, there is no existing zoning on that parkland. You can see the proposed C84 within the dotted line, and again, there's no residential use in that area. The applicant is required to complete a racial equity report because there is a proposed increase in non-residential floor area of at least 200,000 square feet. The applicant is not proposing any residential development, and the C84 zoning district does not permit residential use. The development site is in Puma 4107. In 2020, the census indicates that in the Elmhurst and South Corona area, a majority of the population was Hispanic at 53%, 35% identified as Asian non-Hispanic, 5% identified as white non-Hispanic, and 5% identified as black non-Hispanic. From 2010 to 2020, the area's total population in Elmhurst and South Corona increased by 5%, which is comprised of Asian non-Hispanic population increase of 16%. The Hispanic population increased by 5%, while the Black non-Hispanic population dropped by 18%, and the white non-Hispanic population dropped by 25%. The profile of anticipated new jobs for non-residential space with a known tenant includes arts, recreation, and entertainment with 3,242 jobs, retail trade at 18 jobs, administrative support and waste management at 701 jobs, and missing on this map, it didn't transfer over when we transferred it over, is accommodation and food services at 2,733 jobs. So the total there is correct, 6,693. We just missed the accommodation and food service jobs. So the environmental review, the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination is the lead agency for this project. The DEIS identified significant adverse impacts with respect to transportation and water and sewer infrastructure, and mitigation measures will be further explored in the FEIS. And that wraps up the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephen. And it was extremely clear. And before I start with Commissioner Benjamin, I just wanted to pose a couple of quick questions to you off the bat. One of them is, obviously, there's some demapping of parkland, some mapping of parkland, and even in the current context with no actual parkland there, perhaps even demapping the parkland here might result in more usable park space. But I wanted to talk to you about that for a second. In terms of the gain and loss on paper, it looks to me like the demapping of parkland would result in a loss of 24.84 acres. Is that correct?
Well, the applicant is saying 25.11, but that doesn't, if you're adding in that little bulb half area, then I think you're right. Okay.
So it's a loss of 25.11 and then a gain of 0.77. Is that where 24.84 comes from? Okay. And then in terms of the practical, so right now it's a parking lot, how much actual usable parkland could be the result of this proposal?
It's approximately also 25 acres. If you look at, if I go back, you can kind of, it'd be great if we had a few more illustrations of the development site, the proposed development site, but you can see it right here. You can see all that green space around the development sites, mainly between City Field and the proposed development site, which is at its the widest part is 390, and I think it goes down to about 300 or 330. And then you have the new 3 something at the bottom by the Roosevelt Station, Area C, and then you have a few pocket areas around the development site where they're adding developed program park space. So you're getting quite a bit of park space from that, 25 acres.
Okay, got it. Next, I just wanted to focus for a second on Site B for a moment, and the connection between the proposed Site B and the subway right there. I wanted you to talk about this for a second because this looks like either an improved or new entrance and that it connects with Site B, but I also understand this is at a higher level from the street. So can you just talk about that for a moment?
Sure. So this proposal, this development site is the site that has commercial uses in addition to the parking structure. So the Taste of Queens food hall there is kind of the top of the development site. And below that, on the first floor, and I believe the second floor too, is parking. And then there's a parking structure that goes up to, I have it on the slide here, a 9-floor parking space with a 100-foot parking structure with that many spaces, a total of 899. So there's the parking structure, and then there's the commercial use next to it, which where the Queens Food Hall sits on top of. And that is at the level of the elevation of the train station, which provides a new access point, a better access point into that train station. Right now, I believe you have to walk down metal steps, either to get down to Roosevelt, to walk to to walk to Citi Field, or you have to walk down other metal steps to get down into the baseball field or to the asphalt parking.
Okay. And last one for me, the proposal to map streets corresponding with a relocated ramp in connection to the Grand Central Parkway. What's the status of conversations with city or state DOT as it relates to doing a complicated addition like that?
Indeed. So one of the issues that we've been working very hard on is trying to get all the different agencies to adhere to this timeline established by the state, and it's been fun to do. And state DOT has to have approval over some sections of the mapping, review of that, as well as the city. So both city and state, the Department of Transportation need to be able to see that and kind of sign up on approval. In addition to that, Parks Department obviously is heavily involved with this project. They have questions about how, they work on the site, so they have to be able to get in and around the park, to go to work, to do things. So they want to understand how the access works in and out of the development. So we have a lot of people, a lot of different agencies working on this and reviewing documents and plans and maps.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me go to Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions about both the timing of which you speak in two ways. When we approve, if the zoning map and map changes are approved by us, so it moves on, and by the council, and it moves on to the next stage, which I assume is the demapping. Is that correct?
So a lot of these processes are happening at the same time.
Correct.
Because we don't have the luxury of, doing it slow, step by step, like we would typically do on a project.
Right.
So the process here is, if this is certified today, it'll go out for public review, and then beginning of the year, we get to the state alienation. That could happen in January. It could happen in June. We don't know when that would happen or if it will happen. So then next summer is when the applications are due to the Gaming Facilities Location Board, right? So that's when those would have to be submitted. We don't need an approval for these 4 applications that are going to be at city planning until the CACs vote on it and push it through and submit it to the Gaming Facilities Location Board in September. So September is really the deadline that we're working with here. The final vote 9/30, then those are submitted to the state, and that's when they must have all approvals in place.
Okay, so assume all of those things happen, but they're not one of the chosen 3. Meanwhile, they've got their zoning map change, they've demapped, although the city may not have signed the demapping agreements. I don't know where that kind of falls in this list of items.
Yeah.
What is there that then stops them from building a complying C84?
So we don't have to, we'll hold the applications. So the first thing we'll do is, if this is approved by the commission and the city council, we'll have our CPC report detailing the process and what we're going to be doing, holding the applications, not filing them with the BP's office or the appropriate agencies until they're awarded a license. And that's something that the city can do.
Have we done it before?
I think we've had, I don't know if how long that period has been, but we have held applications before.
I'd like to know more about that part of it. And secondly, there is nothing that we are doing or would do after, when this comes back for a vote, that actually ties Cohen and Hard Rock to Taste of Queens or anything else that we saw. Is that correct?
Well, I think the City Planning Commission report, if there were certain specific things that were requested by the commission, that could be outlined in the CPC report, but then the CACs would have to review that. And city planning is part of that process, of the CAC process. As a city agency, we're going to be reviewing those applications. We don't vote on it, but we'll be reviewing them. EDC is going to be reviewing it for the financials and the economic aspect, the fiscal policies, and what they're contributing.
But let's say, for instance, the Taste of Queens, that the local merchants on the west side of the facility, and there are many small restaurants and other things like that, let's say they don't want the Taste of Queens, and the CAC, as a result, approves it without the Taste of Queens. Is that possible?
Yes, that's possible.
And there's nothing that we're doing that ties the CAC to approving the site plans that we may see. You can certainly comment, and the department can comment, but the final site plan will not be ours necessarily.
That's right. It's the actions that are before you today, the mapping and demapping and the zoning district. Okay,
so it could look very different than what we're seeing. And one of the issues that has always been with us, whether it was in Willets Point or in the new city field or anything else, has always been the airport and how tall buildings can be that are in the flight path and the amount of noise that is created depending on which runways are being used. How has that been taken into account, given that these at least two of the buildings are significantly taller than Chase Stadium?
So,
City Field, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Like you, I'm old.
So those, I believe those have been vetted with the proper federal agencies. I'll confirm that and see what they've said in response to those. But I think because they're not significantly taller, I don't know what the height limit would require to have to be in order for them to, flag it as an issue. But I do believe it's been reviewed, but I'll confirm that.
Okay, and does that mean we're going to have triple glazed windows here because of when you're at City Field? It is true when a plane goes overhead, or if you're at the open facility, when planes go overhead, it is quite noisy.
Sure.
So will the hotels have triple glazed windows? Will we be requiring that as part of the?
There has been no discussion of triple glazed windows or any windows and what they consist of. But if it's an issue, I can ask the applicant what their plans are in relationship to building resiliency and how they're planning to develop the property.
Okay, that would be great.
And of course, they'll be here at a public hearing to answer those questions too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gold.
Just a quick point to follow up on the chair's question on the parkland. So we're demapping 25 acres that's currently being used as the parking lot, but we're going to pick up 25 acres. I guess when I look at the rendering, it looks like you can see park around, but that's all presumably space that I guess right now is open and just not mapped as a park. Is that conceptually the right way to think about it? So in other words,
it's park.
Go ahead.
It's mapped as park.
It is mapped as
Yeah.
park. So we're demapping 25 acres of park. Are we remapping 25 acres as well?
No, because it's already park.
So
it's already designated as park.
So we're giving up that parking lot that's not really being used as park, but as a result of that, the expectation is, or the plan or the deal is that the rest of it will be really made into a park. Is it sort of that simple?
Yeah, that's basically.
So net, the way to think about it maybe is we have 50 acres mapped as park right now, 25 are going away, and 25 will actually be put into use?
Yeah, and it'll be much improved. I mean, you can go there now and you could see like strips of some trees that are a bit sad. Mm-hmm. But, this would be more idea that's going to be programmed, redone, and properly fitted as park space and open space.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Commissioner Benjamin's question. So if the action goes through, but they don't get allocated a casino license, our recourse is that, from what I understood, you can hold submitting the paperwork to the necessary agencies to file that. I see Susan coming up because the question is, can a future owner sue the city for a specific performance and say, well, this was agreed upon?
We're going to be very clear in the report that the approvals are contingent on the granting of the license. And if the granting of the license they don't get the license and the approvals don't come into effect. So not only can we hold up filing maps, but we can actually be clear in the report itself from the commission that that's the case.
Thank you.
Before you go, Susan, because I suspect this will come up later, so let me just go back to Commissioner Benjamin, who I think has a point of clarification on this, and then we'll keep going.
I thought we couldn't do contingent zoning, that we could do zoning because it's appropriate, or we could not do zoning, but I thought we couldn't do zoning, it's appropriate, maybe?
Well, it's appropriate only if they have the license. So I'll look into it. I think we can do it here. That's how we've talked about. Certainly with the mapping.
Mapping is different than the zoning, right?
But we've always looked at this zoning as something that is acceptable if it's not park. And if it remains park, then we can't zone it because park doesn't get zoning. So it has to be, the zoning district has to be contingent on it not being parkland anymore. And that won't happen unless they get the license. So it's not exactly the standard situation because parkland doesn't have zoning, so we can't.
Although it can.
No, parkland in the city doesn't get zoning. If it's real parkland.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not open space.
This is Stephen Leonard, Director of Technical Review. So, I agree with Susan Amaron, the General Counsel.
Well, that's good.
It's usually a good habit. But even if the zoning map amendment were to go into effect and the city map amendment didn't go into effect, then the CA4 would be mapped over parkland, and parkland is not subject to zoning, so it would have no practical effect in terms of the development potential of any of the land we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation, but I'd like to see more about the contingent, because we could use it other times.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is not, because...
Danger, Will Robinson, danger!
Because this is parkland, it doesn't, it's a different situation than it would be elsewhere, because parkland doesn't have zoning, and so unless it is alienated and not parkland, then it can't be, we don't zone it. And so I think I'll look into it a little bit more and write up something, but this really is a different situation because of the fact that it's parkland.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Sorry, the alienation legislation is also only for the purposes of the gaming facility. And so if they don't get the license, then the alienation legislation would not be effective.
Although the state could do whatever they want. They're certain to add, because they only do alienations when there's a mapping of and more parkland that more than balances out.
It would be extremely unusual for the state to take a limited alienation legislation that is proposed and broaden it. Much more likely that the state takes things and limits it. But and this is, as drafted now, is limited. The alienation legislation is also only an authorization for the city. It doesn't in and of itself alienate the property.
Thanks, Susan.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Mann.
Thank you. Stephen, I just had a question about existing ownership of the site, because I'm a little blurry there. Do you have a simple description of who controls the site today and how?
The Parks Department controls the site, and then they lease specific areas to different entities, the Mets organization.
And do you know what the length of that lease term is for the surface parking?
I think I did at one point. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah,
but they would be renegotiated if this was to carry on.
Yeah, I think it's just a point worth emphasizing here for the commission that this is publicly owned land, right, that is in a long-term lease with the Mets for parking. So I do think there's a broader set of policy questions here about what we should be doing with city-owned land and what zoning actions we should be pursuing to facilitate our larger planning objectives for this neighborhood. So just wanted to draw that point out. On the parking, you said 13,000 parking spaces, if I got you correctly.
I said 13,750.
750. Can you describe a little bit of how that parking is broken out for the uses and sort of the rationale for that number of spaces?
So I think the main breaking out is between development site A, if I have this up here, here we go, which is the casino and related uses. That's 5,500 parking spaces. And that's designated for those uses, the casino, the gaming facility, hotel, et cetera. B, C, and D are more parking for the Mets, visitors, residents who come in. I would imagine some of them are probably more flexible spaces too. Plus, because Site C currently has some commuter parking that's open during the week, and that's going to remain open during the week so people can drive there and go to the subway station. So that's how it's broken down, kind of like the Mets-controlled parking, more Mets-oriented parking and visitor parking, and Site A is for the development side of the casino gaming facility.
I mean, I'm wondering if there's a sort of understanding of the sort of merit or the need for 13,750, you said, spaces at this location, if there's been any sort of analysis to really help us understand whether that's the right amount of parking for a development of this scale?
I think because of the stadium, they have existing, whatever, 8,000, whatever the number was, 7,423 spaces. They have a lot of parking existing, and they want to maintain their parking. So if you add on to that,
right,
a hotel, a recreational facility, people driving in from out of state to go gamble, stay at the hotel, those are car drivers for the most part that I think the applicant is assuming. There's probably a breakdown in the environmental review that we could review to see exactly how it's broken down, but not to get into other applications, but the other applications, most of them want a large number of parking spaces too. It's something that they all look to do.
Just one last question, just on the site plan approval, which I think has come up a couple of times. Obviously, there's no site plan approval as part of this application. So they're showing illustrative site plans. And so I'm interested to understand whether the CAC has the authority to bind applicants to specific site plans.
So my understanding is that the CACs would be voting and discussing with the applicant details of their project. If certain details are not something that they feel, if one of the members of the CAC is like, I'm just using a hypothetical here, there's no background on this. If they say, no, you should only have 11,000 parking spaces, you shouldn't get 12,000 parking spaces, and that's a deal breaker for them, then they're going to vote no on it, right? So I think that's how that gets resolved. But if it's something that the applicant, we don't know exactly what each applicant will be looking at. Maybe they've put in extra parking spaces with the idea that they might be cut back. Just talking about parking, I don't have this on any knowledge.
Yeah, so I think it might be helpful just to clarify sort of the site plan approval that CAC can or cannot bind an applicant to, because obviously, especially the open space in particular here seems to be a fairly fundamental set of questions.
Yeah.
And so this is just an illustrative site plan for us. We're just approving theoretically the mapping actions in the zoning map action, but they could rearrange the site plan significantly.
Yes, and it's difficult too because that is being controlled by the state, and we've had a good working relationship with the state on the project so far, and we believe we will continue to, but what they view as important to a site might be different from what the city views as important to the site.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think this is an important point, which is the mechanism that the CAC would have to be able to lock in the site plan more generally. Because as Commissioner Benjamin pointed out, we're approving what we're approving. There will be some limitations based on how the thing is resolved, but the CAC is the ultimate determiner here of what the site actually looks like. And so how will the CAC lock in a site plan, I think is a important question. So we should come back on that. Okay, let me go on to Commissioner Osorio.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for the presentation, as always. It's really helpful to have your guidance in surfing through. I have really two questions. The first question actually builds really well on the previous discussion, which is that given the magnitude of the impacts on this special natural waterfront area, and acting now as the Coastal Commission, I wonder if we have any additional sort of like power to actually make some recommendations / potential requirements on the site plans, given the fact that the environmental impact study is already signaling the existence of significant adverse impacts on water quality, sewer infrastructure, and this is a special natural waterfront area that is not just contained within the site, but includes all of Flushing Meadows. So it's a question to sort of like understand a little bit, you know, whether we now acting as the Coastal Commission have a little bit more leverage, or at least space to engage further in that conversation.
I mean, that's a good question, and the discussion is important. I think I wanted just to highlight also that Parks Department is heavily involved with reviewing every aspect of this proposal, and they want to make sure that any deal that is made is a good deal for the city and a good deal for the outcomes for the city. So they have eyes on it, and we have eyes on it, but I understand your question, and it's something we should look into.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And maybe in more detail or specifically, I'm very interested in how is the landscaping, the proposed landscaping, specifically addressing heat mitigation impacts. As you noted, I mean, it's clear that there's an intent to address potential heat island effect and so forth. Obviously, that's contingent upon the final design of the buildings and so forth. But I would like to understand at least what are we aiming for, number one, and then number two. I remember that there is, or I would love to understand how is the mapping and demapping component of the conversation related to the phasing of the resiliency improvements. Because if I'm not mistaken, Site D is going to actually be following a little bit later, and that's critical for the conversation that we're having today. So I would love to understand a little bit, you know, how are these things actually playing out in real time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kamani?
Thank you, and thank you so much for the presentation. The question I want to ask, I asked of Commissioner Mann while you were presenting. I just wanted to put it out there, and it may be silly, but I just want to understand, if the applicant is not awarded a gaming license, then does this site, all of it, just remain as is, or does it become available for like any other applicant to say, like, everything but a casino? Like, what happens? It
remains as is.
Okay.
It remains as it,
forever.
Existing conditions. But I can't promise forever.
I mean, that's like, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I understand.
The lifetime of the site, and it kind of related to what Commissioner Mann said, like other development policies, like, but pretty much if the applicant doesn't get it, this just stays as is.
That's correct.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Marin?
Thank you, Chair. So kind of following the park questions, because I'm a little bit perplexed as how we go from 25 acres of open space to 0.77, albeit this never felt like a real open space park, if you will, because it was used as parking. What does that do for the open space requirements for the community? And are we meeting the open space requirements that we are required to have?
So the open space is seen as something that's going to be newly developed and new usable space, whereas now, and, you know, in some ways it's because it's just a surface parking lot, you know, anything you do there is going to be available to the public in a nice space. Right. So I think that's how the applicant is viewing it for the community. We're having all this new reprogrammed space. We're going to actually have the parkland, where now it's just asphalt with no plans on it. So I think from the applicant's point of view, this is going to be a positive thing for the community that they're going to come in and use. And that's also, I think, tied to the fields that they're using on Roosevelt. They're redeveloping the fields next to Site C and the food hall and the uses of that space in the community facility space.
No, I would agree that it is improved, because now it feels like open space parkland, right? But if this is mapped as a park, was the 25 acres being counted as the open space required for this community, and are we still meeting that open space requirement? That's the real crux of the question.
Okay, I'll have to look further into that for background on how it was being viewed previously and counted.
Right.
I'll talk to the Parks Department on that.
Right, because we may have been counting it as open space per capita and not really using it as open space. But if we're losing 25 acres, we're losing 24 and a change, and, you know, we are losing 24.23 acres of open space for the community. Mm-hmm. That could otherwise have been developed as a park. But I do understand we have Flushing Meadows Corona, which is huge. So I'm just making sure that we have addressed this and looked at it, made sure it's right.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rampersad?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Two quick questions I had was, when the soccer stadium was approved, what was the number of parking spaces they were going to Citi Field for?
I'll have to look into that. I'm not sure.
And in this scenario, Building B would be the parking structure allocated for the soccer stadium when they're in use?
No, it's allocated. It's
DNC?
It could be used by, they're saying it could be used by the soccer stadium people, but it's not necessarily for that. It's for the Mets and for visitors to come in and use. So I think the idea is that it's going to be more flexible.
Right.
And they'll have, if they have spillover, they can use it because it's there, and just be more amenable to having a better space so you're not having cars backed up as congested as it could be.
And one second question, because a lot of questions I was thinking about were already asked, was who is financially responsible, or who would be financially responsible for developing all this parkland in between the stadiums or just throughout the project?
The applicant is
fully, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Goodrich?
Along with John's question, I have another kind of a silly question, which is, so all of this public space is owned by the private applicant?
No, it's parkland. It's city parkland.
Okay, so it's owned by the city.
City controls the parkland and what can go on there. In order to alienate the parkland, the applicant has to go to the state to get the alienation legislation.
Okay. And how long has it been in its current state? Because I am not a Queens person, so you asked me about Prospect Park, I would know the answer.
Sure. So the area site A is where Shea Stadium used to be located, which was torn down in approximately 2006. And that's when they built Citi Field, which is between site B and D there. So prior to that, it was a parking lot. It was a parking lot for the World's Fair in 1939 and remained a parking lot up until it became Shea Stadium in the 60s.
And how active has this parking lot been? Is it like it's full every day? Is it like this huge community resource, or is it like it's half abandoned and some people go, some people don't?
It's, I don't have any occupancy rates on the parking lots. I could ask the applicant for that because they control the Mets also. At least I believe they do. But it's utilized for all stadium events, for all baseball games and other things that happen at the stadium. I don't know if Billy Joel's playing there anymore, but maybe somebody else will.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Thank you, Stephen, very much. This item is certified. We'll look forward to picking it up down the line here, and thank you for the follow-ups. Okay, let's move on. Sarah?
The second item on our agenda is a certification of a city map amendment in Brooklyn Community District 14. Our presenter is Abraham Abreu.
All right, Abraham, welcome.
Afternoon. Taking you to Brooklyn and to the opposite side of the scale and complexity spectrum here. This is certification for New York Community Hospital of Brooklyn. This is the city map change in East Midwood, Brooklyn, which is CD 14. So here's just a quick overview. This is located at 2525 Kings Highway in Brooklyn, New York. The applicant is the New York Community Hospital of Brooklyn. They are seeking an amendment to the city map to eliminate, discontinue, and close a portion of Avenue O between Bedford Avenue and Kings Highway. You can see up in the corner that this is a triangle between Kings Highway, Bedford Avenue, and Avenue O, is where this hospital is. And they are seeking this so that they can construct an infectious disease isolation unit and adding approximately 1,500 square feet of hospital space. So a bit of a background about the why and how of this project. So on October 16th, 2014, partly in response to the Ebola virus outbreak that was happening at the time, the New York State Department of Health issued an order for summary action. Basically, this meant that general hospitals had to implement and maintain isolation rooms or infectious disease isolation units, and these have to be completely isolated, as implied, from the main hospital. So the hospital looked at their space, decided that it was limited, and they determined that the best way to comply with this was to build out an expansion of the hospital to contain this IDIU. Also significant to the discussion here is that they currently have a revocable consent from DOT for this covered ADA access ramp that you can see in the picture. So this is currently within the map street, but it is used for hospital purposes. Here's a look at the project site on our land use map. So you can see the hospital site is that triangle right in the middle in blue. It is an R7A zoning district. You can see that there's higher density residential and some commercial use along Kings Highway, which is a major thoroughfare. Then as you get a little bit farther out, it kind of steps down to lower density residential districts like R2. Here's an aerial view. So again, the hospital site is that triangle in the middle, bordered by Kings Highway, Avenue O, Bedford. You can see kind of the characteristics of the neighborhood, some of the other major arterials like Nostrand Avenue, and some of the community facilities that are nearby. You can see it's near two schools, PS 197, which is Kings Highway Academy, and James Madison High School to the south. Coming in a little bit closer, hopefully this will kind of help show what's happening here. So that orange sort of, or yellow kind of arrowhead shape is the area of public street that they are looking to demap. So you can see that along the southern side of Avenue O, which is currently mapped at 80 feet wide, that southern sidewalk is currently about 23, 24 feet wide. They're looking to demap an 11.7 foot wide strip of that adjacent to the hospital building. That runs for about 118.4 feet. And then the frontage on Kings Highway that they're looking to demap is about 39.4 feet. So this totals to be about 1,358 square feet of the street to be demapped. Take a quick look at a couple of site photos here. So this is looking at the site facing northeast on Kings Highway. That's the main entrance of the hospital, which you can see with that blue and white awning there in the middle. Moving around, this is kind of looking head on at the corner between Avenue O and Kings Highway. And this is where the actual physical extension to the hospital will be built out. And then finally, in terms of site photos, now we're looking southwest on Avenue O. This is the ADA access ramp and awning. That is the subject of the revocable consent with DOT. This is the site plan, which I hope will be useful. Unfortunately, on the back, the colors aren't, yeah, it looks a lot better up there. That one on the back, you can't see the color gradation very well. But so the main picture you've got in blue is would be the proposed new tax lot, because the applicant is looking to acquire the DMAP space if they get this approved, and the red is the area proposed to be DMAP'd. And then to the right, we have the inset map, and the reason why I'm disappointed about the colors not showing up back there is basically you can see there's a white area and a gray area, right? So the gray area would be the actual physical extended part of the building, which would house the IDIU on the first floor, and additional hospital facilities on the second and third floor. So it's about a 500 square foot footprint, so about 1,500 square feet overall of additional space. The IDIU would have its own entrance and be otherwise completely separate from the rest of the hospital, so that regular patients aren't being intermingled with people with these highly infectious diseases. The white part of that arrowhead shape is represented by the existing access ramp that is currently the subject of that revocable consent that I mentioned. So essentially they're looking to DMAP an area for the building and also the area that's currently the revocable consent where the ramp is. So yeah, summary, New York Community Hospital of Brooklyn is looking to eliminate this continuing closed portion of Avenue O at Kings Highway, to develop a 3-story expansion of the hospital with a 500 square foot footprint, so that they can enable the construction of this IDIU as required by the state. This encompasses the area currently under DOT revocable consent for the pedestrian ramp. So even though the mapped width of the street is being decreased by 11.7 feet on that sidewalk, functionally pedestrian circulation isn't going to really be affected because there's already something there. It's just moving from being covered by a revocable consent to being DMAP'd officially. And that ADA access would be maintained. And I believe that is also where the entrance to the IDIU would be. And the area to be DMAP'd would be acquired by the applicant. So that's the presentation. Happy to answer questions, which I see already we've got some.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just ask one, which is just a point of clarification, which I posed to you last week, just to share for the benefit of the commission. I had asked the question as to whether they could have done the expansion or proposed the expansion through a revocable consent. And the answer is no, you cannot. And will you just explain that?
Yeah, well, the key word, the key idea in revocable consent is revocable, right? And so if you have a permanent building in a revocable consent and the city decides to revoke it, what do you do, right? And so it's usually used just for temporary stuff.
Thank you. Commissioner Dweck?
Thank you. I understand the demapping action, but why is there not a disposition action coming along with it?
So city map actions have rolled into it the authority for acquisition and disposition for the stuff directly related to the mapping. So they don't need a separate one for this because the city map action in of itself authorizes it.
Will there be a price established, or?
Yeah, it has to be fair market value, just like usual. I'm not familiar with the exact details of that process, but yes, just like a.
So who handles that?
Yeah. DCAS probably?
It's Stephen Leonard again, Director of Technical Review. It would be Department of Citywide Administrative Services. The disposition would move forward pursuant to all of the requirements for disposition. It's not like a special kind of disposition. It's just that we don't need a separate ULURP action for disposition because it's part of the mapping action.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, great. Thank you very much. This item is certified. Let's move on to item 3 for today.
The third item on our agenda is a presentation of a non-ULURP authorization in Manhattan Community District 5. Our presenter is Ezra Mosher.
Hello, Ezra.
Hi, how's it going? Good afternoon, Commissioners. All right, let's see. Great. So this is actually a special presentation regarding, as you can see, the Flatiron Building's residential conversion, which is requesting an authorization to do so. That authorization is currently actually out for referral at the Community Board, and it will return to the Commission for consideration and approval in October, but we want to take the opportunity to present and discuss the application with you all before it returns in October. The applicant is the Broadway organization. The requested actions, as I outlined, are an authorization that would allow for the conversion of what's currently vacant commercial office space in the Flatiron Building, located at 175 Fifth Avenue, to residential floor area. It's within Manhattan Community District 5, and again, just to reiterate, and I'll delve more into it later, but this item will come in front of the Commission for review at the October 15th review session. So today's special presentation, again, is just a preview, opportunity to ask questions, which, if there are, I can answer on the 15th. So the Flatiron Building is located at 175 Fifth Avenue. It's located within a C64M district, and the authorization is made pursuant to Section 1520B, and in this case, it would allow the conversion of floors 2 through 22 to residential. I'd note that upon CHO's implementation, notwithstanding any amendments to the relevant provisions here, this is a section that will be rendered eventually unnecessary. However, the project is, timeline is sensitive, and it would require approval prior to the City Council vote and adoption in order to keep everything in place and effectuate the conversion. So here's a land use area map. Again, I think that the Flatiron Building needs not much of an introduction, but it's highlighted in purple here. It's located on its very unique triangular block, which is bounded by Broadway, Fifth Avenue, East 23rd Street, right where it becomes West 23rd Street on the far side of Fifth Avenue, and then East 22nd Street directly to the south. And the surrounding area, as you can see, is primarily both commercial, but also a good deal of mixed commercial and residential, along with some just multifamily residential buildings. This shows the Flatiron Building in its context. We're oriented to the north of the site, actually looking due south, but you can kind of tell because in the foreground you see Madison Square Park. And the perspective, I think, helps underscore the really unique architectural features and layouts of this building, being so triangular. So the building was a single tenant occupancy, apart from the ground floor retail, and it was occupied by the Macmillan Publishing Group. It was their headquarters. They vacated in 2019, and the building above ground level has basically been vacant ever since. And there were some attempts made to undertake a gut renovation to try to attract a new commercial tenant, but these were unsuccessful. This eventually sent the property to auction. And due to the difficulty in attracting commercial tenants to, again, the very triangular layouts, this led ownership to pursue a residential conversion. So this is a section view on the right-hand side of the proposed conversion. It's a little tricky to see. I'll give you a little more detail in a second. But basically, the conversion, again, floors 2 through 22, which is everything above the commercial ground floor. So that's 181,000 square feet of floor area would be converted to residential use, which would result in 39 units. And again, with these sections that you see on the right-hand side, the area that's highlighted in yellow would all be residential. Areas that are gray would remain commercial. The section that you can see on the left-hand side is looking north. It's kind of taken close to East 22nd Street, and so you can see on the kind of lower left-hand side of that image that there's some of the commercial ground floor space visible. The other section is looking east, like through the middle of the building. It's like a north-south section of it, and you can see in the kind of nose of the building some of the commercial space. I don't think that this image does it the most justice, so I'll go to this one, which kind of shows a ground floor layout. So there's going to be 2 remaining commercial, separate commercial tenants, and the remainder of the space will be accessory residential lobby, essentially. So again, a good balance on this ground floor between space to bring, future tenants up to their respective units, and then keeping 2 commercial units at grade. Whoops. This gets a little bit of a hard push on the button. So here's what a typical floor layout would look like. Again, this is roughly what floors 2 through 22 would look like, although the 22nd floor, because of setbacks, would be a single unit just because it, would result in even smaller floor plates. So roughly 2 units per floor. These would be relatively upscale residential developments, most likely condominiums. And the actions necessary to facilitate this, really action singular in front of you today, is a authorization, again, pursuant to Section 1520B, which basically waives preservation requirements for buildings that are in C6-4M districts. You can redevelop ground up and fully have a residential building, but for conversions, there is this somewhat vestigial requirement to preserve 50% of the floor area for conforming non-residential uses. And so the authorization in front of you allows these preservation requirements to be waived or modified if the findings are generally made that, one, the building is an LPC landmark or is within a historic district, which this building is individually designated landmark. 2, that any and all alterations obtain a certificate of appropriateness from LPC, which the applicant has. 3, that a continuing maintenance program for the landmark is established, and this has been done through their restrictive deck, which will be approved as part of the project. And then 4, that the residential density, so the maximum number of units, complies with the dwelling unit factors that are pertinent to a C6-4 district and in the Section 74-711 special permit. Additionally, findings-wise, the Commission must find that the waiver will have minimal adverse impact on conforming uses, both within the building and in the surrounding area. And it's just worth emphasizing again that the building is vacant, essentially, except for 2 ground floor retail units. And again, just emphasizing that once City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is passed, the pertinent sections of the zoning resolution will likely be removed. So this also includes generally these preservation requirements for non-residential space, which in some of these central districts, are viewed as, again, to use the word vestigial. So there's also a chairperson certification that's requested as part of this, which waives and modifies the what are called rooftop open space recreation space requirements, which was really, again, a legacy of a 1980s text amendment that allowed for the easier conversion of non-residential buildings to residential, but required tenant-full building accessible open space on the roofs, but this can often prove difficult, especially with buildings with setbacks and not much room to provide that. So a waiver is being requested there as well. So that's my presentation. Any questions?
Great. Thanks, Ezra. Just one from me, and it's really just to make sure that I understand the current rules, putting aside the fact that we've proposed to streamline this in the context of City of Yes for Housing. The existing preservation requirement under 15-211 requires you keep 50% of the floor area for non-residential. 1520B gives you an opportunity for relief. But in the findings for relief, one of them is that it's a landmark or a landmark district. Does that mean there's no opportunity for, I recognize this is contrary to what we have here, but does that mean there's no opportunity for relief from this rule if you are not a landmark or in a landmark district? So if you don't fall into that category, no relief if you're in a C6-4M?
Yeah, that would be the case. I think that looking at the other districts as well, there's a good degree of overlap between at least the ones like C6-4M and M1-5M that are in Manhattan with extensive historic districts. So yes, that's correct that if you're outside of one, this wouldn't be available.
Okay. All right. Got it. Thank you. Let's see if there's other questions. Commissioner Mann?
Ezra, just a quick question here. Just clarifying MIH applicability, and this might be a come back to me kind of question, but I thought that the framework was where there's discretionary actions that would facilitate residential, MIH gets mapped, and this would seem to be in that bucket. So I just was curious about the kind of affordable housing framework for conversions and sort of what the department's thinking was there.
So in this case, it's in a district where, because you're allowed to develop ground up with the full 12 FAR maximum, even though this is surrounding conversions, it's not considered eligible for MIH because theoretically you're allowed to realize that full amount of residential were you to tear down and rebuild.
Got it. So even though they couldn't do that,
Correct.
theoretically, because they're allowed to do that, the department takes a position that MIH doesn't apply.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so we will pick this one back up. We will see this here likely in October. So stay tuned. Thank you, Ezra, for the special report.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 4.
The fourth item on our agenda is a pre-hearing review of a notice of intent to acquire office space in Manhattan Community District 1. Our presenter is Trevor Lovitz.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Hi, Trevor. Good afternoon.
This is an application by the New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services and the Department for the Aging for the acquisition of 80,000 square feet of office space through a 20-year lease pursuant to Section 195C of the New York City Charter. DCAS and DFTA, as the Department for the Aging is known, are co-applicants for this application. A little background about DFTA: it provides various services and programs to seniors via both direct service and contracted providers. Its headquarters is at 2 Lafayette Street, which you can see at left in blue. In addition to agency staff, a senior employee services unit, information referral call center, caregiver resource center, elderly crime victims resource center, foster grandparent program, bill payer program, health insurance information counseling and assistance program, and volunteer resource centers are all housed at 2 Lafayette Street currently, which serves about approximately 150 clients on a routine business day. DFTA proposes to relocate from 2 Lafayette to 14 Wall Street, shown at right, which is roughly 10 minutes downtown by foot. So DFTA has occupied its space at 2 Lafayette Street since the 1980s, occupying approximately 136,000 square feet at 2 Lafayette, which is a city-owned asset. Roughly 300 full-time employees report to the site, in addition to roughly 150 part-time and non-traditional staff. DFTA states that the interior layout of 2 Lafayette is poorly suited to meet its operational needs. In addition, DFTA states that the state of repair in their offices has deteriorated over its decades-long tenancy. In July 2021, when quantifying costs of a full renovation of the 7 floors occupied, the total projected cost exceeded $87 million, with an expected time frame of 10 years to complete the project. The proposed space, therefore DFTA and DCAS propose to acquire roughly 80,000 square feet of replacement office space at 14 Wall, across floors 11, 12, and 13. Additionally, DFTA proposes to lease part of the cellar as storage space. 14 Wall Street satisfies all of DFTA's operational and space needs as identified in the fiscal year 2026 citywide statement of needs, and with a compact and modern layout, it can accommodate all agency staff and DFTA's other programmatic requirements. Furthermore, the space DFTA is proposing to lease has already been built out by a previous tenant and is in move-in condition. As far as the surrounding area, I don't think we need to belabor the point since this is the building immediately adjacent to where we are now at 120 Broadway to the south. It's bounded by Wall Street, Broadway, Nassau, and Pine Streets. Suffice to say that there's great access to public transit being served by the 2, 3, 4, 5, J, and Z subway trains, all within a 3-minute walk, and employee commutes would not be substantially altered by this relocation. Just quickly, here are some views of the proposed office space at 14 Wall Street, as well as a sample floor plan depicting the proposed configuration of the 11th floor. And in summary, approval of the action will permit DFTA and DCAS to proceed with filing a notice of intent to lease approximately 80,000 square feet of replacement office space at 14 Wall Street, and the applicant team will be here Wednesday for the public meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions before we pick this one up on Wednesday? Commissioner, go ahead.
Just a quick question. It just seems a little bizarre that they're going to fit so many people into so much less space.
Right. So one of DIPTA's chief complaints about 2 Lafayette Street, it has these irregular floor plates that render most of the floor area unusable and windowless, and that the more compact and modern layout of 14 Wall Street can just as easily house as many employees without substantially sacrificing usable space.
And does DIFTA actually have outside people who come in? Are there many visitors, et cetera? I mean,
according to their materials, they have about 150 people visiting on a daily basis, clients of different sorts.
and that can be accommodated at 14 Wall?
Yes. Apparently all their programmatic requirements can be accommodated there.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, thanks, Trevor. Okay, let's move on to our council mods.
The fifth item on our agenda is a City Council modification scope determination for 3117 12th Street rezoning. The City Council proposes to modify the zoning text amendment to Appendix F, adding the deep affordability option, and staff believe this modification is within scope.
Okay, thank you. There's no presentation here, right?
Not on the 12th Street rezoning.
Okay, all right, no presentation. This one's in scope, pretty simple. I'm gonna just make the scope determination here by a voice vote. Sent by voice vote here to seek a letter to the council that these modifications are in fact within scope. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, thank you. The ayes have it.
The sixth item on our agenda is a City Council modification scope determination for the 250 86th Street rezoning in Brooklyn Community District 10. The City Council proposes to modify the zoning text amendment, and staff believe this modification is within scope. David Weisglass is here to present.
Okay, David, I saw you walking up. I thought it was for the last one, but glad to have you here. Go ahead.
Not my borough. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'll be here to present briefly on 250 86th Street, the City Council modification. So this is a scope determination for 250 86th Street. This is located in Bay Ridge in Community District 10 in Brooklyn. The original application was proposing to rezone an existing R32 zoning district to an R6B zoning district to bring an existing building into zoning compliance and facilitate the construction of a medical office within the building. The CPC voted to approve this application on July 24th of this year. City Council is proposing to reduce the zoning district from the proposed R6B to now an R5D, and reduce the zoning district boundary, removing 4 non-applicant lots from the proposed project area. Due to the reduction of the allowable residential density, the applicant is withdrawing the related MIH text amendment as it's no longer applicable in the R5D district. I'll give you a little bit of background on R5D now. R5D districts are contextual zoning districts designed to encourage residential growth along major corridors. These districts serve as a transition between lower density districts and moderate density districts. R5D zoning districts have an FAR of 2.0 for residential development, 1.95 for heirs FAR, a maximum building height of 45 feet with a qualifying ground floor, a required minimum front yard of 5 feet, and required parking for 66% of dwelling units, or roughly 2 parking spaces per 3 units. The parking requirement for income restricted units would be 35%. The applicant had originally proposed to extend the existing R6B district west from 3rd Avenue along 86th Street, which is a 100-foot wide corridor. And you could see in yellow here the existing R6B district and what was proposed to be extended. The project area is 1 block west of the R subway station, located at the intersection of 86th Street and 4th Avenue, which you can see on the right side of the screen here. While no new development was anticipated as a part of these actions, the applicant had proposed mapping MIH across the project area, and that mapping is consistent with the city policy when there is a significant increase in the allowable residential density or capacity. The City Council is proposing to reduce the zoning district from an R6B to an R5D district, as noted, and reduce the rezoning boundary, removing 4 non-applicant lots from the project area. You can see those lots roughly outlined in that dashed blue line right here. The applicant's property would still be brought into compliance, and the reduction in floor area and height would have no impact on proposed developments, as no proposed development was projected in relation to these actions. However, due to the reduction in allowable residential capacity, the applicant is withdrawing the MIH text amendment associated with this rezoning. This would have been only the second ever mapping of MIH across the entirety of Community District 10 in Bay Ridge. For context, according to the HPD's Housing New York map, only 5 new income-restricted units have been built in Community District 10 since 2014. While no new housing development was anticipated, these modifications would reduce allowable residential capacity along 2 wide streets within 1 block of a subway station and remove MIH applicability in a neighborhood that is producing the fewest new housing units in the city. Nevertheless, the department staff finds that the proposed City Council modifications are indeed within scope. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Okay. All right. Let's proceed to that scope determination. So I'll seek assent by a voice vote to send the letter to the council that these modifications are in fact within scope. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Okay. Future votes for consideration on Wednesday, September 25th is 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue Fresh, which was presented at the September 9th review session, noting Commissioner Duick is recused on that. Also, staff have prepared reports for Brooklyn Yards and 10 Rockefeller Center Hotel Special Permit. On 2360 Broadway, the Bell Nord, this item is laid over, but there was also a letter in your materials. For consideration on Wednesday, we also have Bay Terrace Shopping Center parking authorizations, which was presented at the August 19th review session, and Staten Island SNAD authorizations at 758 Totel Road and 18 Emerson Avenue. Briefing materials were in your beacon materials. Lastly, for Wednesday consideration, staff have prepared a report on the City of Yes for housing opportunity. Also, there was public comments and testimonies in your materials. Okay. Post-hearing follow-ups. For post-hearing follow-ups, we have Port Authority Bus Terminal Replacement, which had a public hearing on September 11th. There were 2 memos added to your materials. Ben is here to present.
Hello, Ben.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So we'll be discussing a few post-hearing items for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey's proposed new Midtown bus terminal. So I have a short agenda. We're going to review some potential text modifications, a post-hearing response letter from the applicant, and a follow-up on our urban design controls discussion. So quick review of the project site. The Port Authority is proposing a replace-in-kind terminal at 8th Avenue. Above the new terminal will be 2 office buildings built by private developers after completion of the terminal. Between 9th and 10th Avenue will be the storage and staging building with spaces for buses. West of 10th Avenue is the helix-shaped ramp structure, which will facilitate movements of buses from the Lincoln Tunnel to the new facility. For this new facility, there are 3 requested actions that the Port Authority is seeking. A zoning text amendment that will incorporate a new section to the bus station special permit with updated findings related to a modern bus facility, a special permit as modified by the proposed text amendment, and a city map amendment involving the elimination of specific volumes on portions of streets and avenues and the disposition of such demapped areas to the Port Authority. With approval of the requested actions, the development site would be considered a single zoning lot. So as discussed at the pre-hearing, on July 24th, Community Board 4 passed a resolution recommending this application be approved with conditions. The vote was 39 in favor and 0 opposing or abstaining. In their resolution letter, the Community Board requested minor clarifications and modifications to the special permit. So to understand these requests, let's quickly review the text amendment and special permit as proposed for the project. So the 2 major items is zoning text amendment, which incorporates a new section to the bus station special permit with updated findings related to a modern bus facility located in any C or M district in Community District 4, authorize the development of portions of a new bus facility in demapped airspaces,
and to authorize the modification of regulations related to any use on the zoning lot. In tandem with that, a special permit as modified by the proposed text amendment to allow the construction of a bus station with appropriate capacity, to allow a building to be built within demapped airspace, and to allow the distribution of floor area without regard to zoning district boundaries, and to modify regulations to facilitate the development of commercial towers on the site. So in response to the community's resolution, the department has worked on the following text modifications. The geographic applicability of the special permit will be more specifically tailored to the project site, clarifying the language so that it will state in any C or M district wholly or partially within the Midtown Special District. While the ability to construct a large bus station is already limited by the need to obtain a special permit subject to ULURP, the department acknowledges that this text does not address the singular nature of the Port Authority bus terminal site. The practical effect of this modification would be to limit the ability of the special permit to the proposed location of the replacement bus terminal. The department also heard comments that references in the proposed text to the bus station and related facilities lacked clear definition as to what constituted a related facility. The department recommends clarifying language that defines bus station and related facilities to mean the station and uses accessory to the station developed in accordance with the grant of the bus station special permit. The department heard comments that the proposed special permit text lacked clarity in its specification of the latitude of the commission to grant relief from zoning provisions. The original proposed text provided the commission with the authority to modify any applicable regulations of the zoning resolution other than floor area provisions. The department agrees this text should be clarified and recommends that the scope be narrowed to specify that the commission may grant relief from mandatory district plan elements, bulk regulations other than floor area, and distribution of floor area. Finally, the department recommends that references to bus station throughout the proposed text be modified to bus station and related facilities for consistency and clarity. So we had a number of questions and specific requests for the Port Authority raised by the Commission at the public hearing. To complete this response, the Port Authority has typed up a letter that covers the following topics that were raised. The entrances and design of 9th Avenue and 40th Street corner, clarifying that no public parking will be provided, providing info on bus carrier rates, info on interim transit impacts during construction, and info on sustainable features of the new terminal. The full details of these responses are contained in the letter that was provided to the Commission. We will discuss the first topic, the corner of 9th and 40th, in detail on our update on urban design controls. So key to the text amendment, the findings of the special permit include many transportation-specific elements like addressing traffic congestion, traffic volumes, and local street impacts. Sections 3 through 6, highlighted here, these include findings that focus on design and the public realm, pedestrian circulation, open spaces, and the civic importance of the site. So as previously discussed, the department worked closely with the Port Authority to develop the urban design controls that are part of the special permit. The UD controls include site plans that codify the specific locations of certain elements, as well as detailed notes that explain how to achieve the design goals outlined. The urban design controls are focused on performance outcomes and not aesthetics, so there is flexibility for the applicant to be creative. We believe the controls ensure the new bus facilities will incorporate design that will improve the relationship between the project and the surrounding neighborhood, with attention, again, to the pedestrian spaces, lighting, and active frontages. These are very specific technical drawings that require specific treatments. On the right is just a screenshot of what's included in the application package. So to review again, the urban design controls are organized by two themes: streetscape and overstreet building elements, and we are proposing relatively small modifications to both, which I'll go through. So here we can see how the urban design controls translate to the site plan. You can see the anticipated ground floor with retail, lobby areas, and circulation space. Each frontage is labeled in the site plan as a different zone to allow for variation in the streetscape controls depending on the location. The bold lines with arrows represent these subject to streetscape controls, while the shaded boxes represent the overstreet elements or bridges that are subject to another group of urban design controls at 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, and 40th Street. These design controls were strategically located to focus on corridors that will help link points south and west to the main terminal and points east. So here's a snapshot of the streetscape urban design controls. This is an example on frontage zone C, which is the east side of 9th Avenue. The specific topics this frontage focuses on is entrances, transparency, blank wall treatments, and signage. The site plan should be designed to show how these elements are met at this streetscape. So here we have a rendering of the proposed main terminal on 8th Avenue. The proposed design controls define minimum dimensions and minimum overhead clearance for the main terminal pedestrian space, require entrances to be located along the western edge, as well as establish design standards for lighting, facade transparency, and signage. The proposal improves and widens the sidewalk to accommodate the anticipated increase in bus terminal users and the general public. The demapping of 41st Street unifies the terminal and allows for increased pedestrian space both inside and outside the terminal, which we believe helps give this terminal a major civic presence on this key frontage on 8th Avenue. So as was discussed at the public hearing, the entrances on the western section of the site are treated differently than the 8th Avenue side. Here we have bifurcated entrances that are a bit smaller and surrounded by retail. Here is a rendering of this corner. We are looking east on 40th Street from 9th Avenue. So the design controls aim to ensure that these entrances are both adequate for the facility and accommodate the pedestrian and users on this side of the terminal. Signage is expected to reflect the commercial character of 9th Avenue, and we expect the activated retail along the site plan to include transparency to improve over the existing condition. The proposal includes wider sidewalks and circulation spaces, retail, as well as enhanced lighting and transparency. While the bus levels are set back from the lot line, the Port Authority plans to maintain the street wall of the existing building at the corner, which will feature a retail location. Here again, we can see entrances to the main terminal along 9th Avenue, sort of in the bottom left of the rendering, and there's an entrance along 40th Street. So that reflects the site plan we just showed in the slide before, which I'm showing again here. The department considered the urban design controls to account for pedestrian congestion along 9th Avenue. Things to consider is that the bollards that are located along the site will reduce the effective sidewalk width, and potential for hire vehicle or taxi loading along the avenue may also conflict with pedestrian flow. So here we have a potential recommendation with a unified entrance. The site plan would hold the street wall along 9th Avenue, but this time consolidate the entrance at the intersection. We believe this could create a more civic presence with the secondary lobby and improve wayfinding and identity for users. The reduction of the street wall a few feet could provide pedestrian congestion relief along this busy corridor, reduce the sort of sidewalk reduction from the bollards, and reduce any conflict with vehicular pickups and drop-offs. For a second recommendation, rather than unify the entrances into a singular lobby, we could reduce the retail at the corner to allow for larger entrances at both 9th Avenue and 40th Street. We believe this recommendation can improve the entrances, However, it may still have some challenges with wayfinding, but we think that could be overcome with signage, clear signage that will be important for the users entering and exiting this side of the terminal. So the department believes this particular entrance, although secondary, is still key for the success of this terminal and vital for users accessing it from both 9th Avenue and further points west. The department believes that, the terminal can hold the corner, but we think that the entrance or entrances should be further prioritized, and we have these two different alternatives. We don't think of these options as the only solutions or that they are binary. There are a number of details that can be altered to improve it. For example, the retail space at the corner could be blended with the lobby if designed without walls, for example. We are still having active conversations with the applicant on this topic. At the conclusion of this presentation, we are hoping to take the Commission's feedback, and then we would work with the applicant to modifying the urban design controls for frontages C and B. So now I'd like to switch to the urban design controls for overstreet building elements. These controls require design features for bridging elements that cross city streets to ensure that they positively contribute to the urban environment with considerations to lighting, noise attenuation, materials, and/or artwork that enhance the pedestrian sidewalk experience. Specifically, I'd like to highlight the control related to mechanical equipment present on the rooftop that is visible from the street. The control states that this equipment should be screened or integrated into the building as much as possible. So here is a rendering the applicant shared for the bridging elements over 10th Avenue. Again, the controls here are focused on lighting, visual expression, and mechanical screening. The department has thought about these particular controls and the existing conditions. We believe that mechanical equipment on the roof should not be the only equipment considered, but also any equipment that may be on the underside of the bridging elements. So here we have a photo of the current bridge over 9th Avenue. You can see piping and other related equipment on the underside of this bridge. Over time, to secure that equipment, additional fencing has been covered on the underside of the bridge. Here's the same bridge, but viewed from another angle. Again, we can see the extensive equipment on the underside of the bridge. Here's a snapshot of the current bridging element urban design controls. Bullet point 3 is the section that the language specifically refers to rooftop mechanical equipment. So our recommendation is to expand this language to include mechanical equipment on the underside of the bridging elements to improve the pedestrian experience below. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted to, in fact, as you leave it on this slide right here, I just wanted to thank you, the department, and the Port Authority for their openness, taking a look at this corner in particular on 9th Avenue and 40th Street. It's an issue that I and others have raised, and it came up at the hearing. And having a look at ways to balance the community's articulation of a desire to have a strong street wall presence there at the corner with the fact that this is a very important entrance to a critical civic space for the city. We have to hit a balance there, so those alternatives are important, and so we'll look forward to a continuing conversation there. So I just wanted to say that out loud. Let me see if there are other questions for you, Commissioner Cerullo.
So, too, I share the chair's comments about this work, and I think these recommended changes are excellent. Just I guess a thought, and I'm glad this is the slide it ended with. All of the focus on trying to create a better pedestrian experience is really obviously a incredible goal. My fear and concern about where we end up, and this is everywhere, you know, the sidewalk is pristine. We used the word wayfinding a few times, and that has a real meaning here. There'll be, you know, once the sidewalk has Link NYC and wayfinding and garbage container bins, and the experience just keeps changing for the pedestrian. So the idea that the physicality of this is being attentive to it is really important, because what ends up happening on the sidewalk is very different than what the design will show. So whatever we can be doing from the building point of view and the recommendations to improve the experience, I totally support. The one very quick question I have is, and we're not seeing this at all on here, but lighting has been a big piece of this project, obviously, and all of what lighting generates and instills in people out on the street. What is the plan? Do we know the plan for lighting on the street? And who is going to be responsible for that? Will city standard light poles be put in? There's not a light pole to be seen on the sidewalk rendering. So I just wonder, do we know what the thought is here? Is the city going to come in and outside this beautiful building just put in a bunch of, like, you know, Cobra heads? Or, I mean, I know the standards have gotten better over time, but do we know what's going to happen here? And I'm assuming there isn't distinctive lighting happening here, because then I guess the Port Authority would be responsible for maintaining it, but and I'm sure that's not a job they want to take on, but just wondering what it might look like and what the plan is. And again, that would be everywhere around the whole project. We're just looking at the 9th Avenue corner here.
Right. That's a very good question, Commissioner. I would say when we are speaking of lighting in the urban design controls, we're specifically speaking to lighting that's achieved on the site itself.
On the building.
So that would be separate from light poles that are in the sidewalk.
Understood.
We don't have the image of this site at night, but the idea is that around this corner along the facade of the building is much improved lighting that is hitting the sidewalk. And so that's kind of what the urban design controls are really speaking to and focusing on improving. But the port, will be working with the Department of Transportation on the locations of any street poles that are considered as well.
Okay, but we don't have an idea of what they're doing. I mean, obviously, the lighting is both, generally, lighting is for the sidewalk and it's for the street. And so we're not seeing either of that, whether the poles are going sort of north-south or the light is, the luminaires are going east-west or north-south. There's a combination of the purpose of the lights, which again, we're not seeing. I just didn't know if that was a conversation taking place, just to have an idea of what was the vision for the exterior lighting unrelated to the project.
Right.
Outside perhaps the design controls that the department is suggesting. But again, it may not be something we know, but it was a thought when I looked, and I thought, look how great the sidewalk looks. There's just nothing, all the assets that will be added to the sidewalk aren't there. And then obviously lighting was the big one, since they're paying a lot of attention in a very positive way to lighting the sort of the project site itself.
Right. Yeah, thank you again. I would say we don't have information on like the location of the light poles or what they're considering along the sidewalk. But certainly, all of those, any of those lighting elements would affect the effective sidewalk width. And so that is something that that discussion we will be involved in moving forward, hopefully.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marin and Commissioner Osorio.
So, I have this colloquy has been circulating now around something that I also was concerned about, because we talked about lighting of the underside of the bridges and how that would impact the sidewalks. Is there, and we're looking at this, and there's not a single tree on the sidewalk. Is there any way that the applicant could create nightly images so we can see what the lighting conditions would be like? And specifically, I'd be interested to see how the lighting of the underside of those bridges would affect sidewalks and those crossovers at night, because I had not had the opportunity to trace through this area for a while, and I did so over the summer, and it is absolutely daunting. So it would be interesting to see how the lighting is going to affect those areas now.
We can take that request to the applicant and see what they can provide. Yeah.
I mean, look, at least there should be some trees here, an indication of trees or where trees are. I understand we're trying to get a grasp of the massing, but we're also looking at the urban environment and what we're creating. And we have boulders, so we should have some trees there.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Osorio. Oh, hang on one sec.
Yeah, so just to follow on to that comment and question, just to remind the Commission that, and has been described, the urban design notes provide, really pretty extraordinarily detailed specifications. One of the things that they do provide for is lighting, specifically lighting conditions where ramps and the building crosses the streets, and ensuring that the lighting is the same as for adjacent street sections, so that you do have adequate and standard levels of street and sidewalk lighting for the areas where the terminal crosses over streets. So we're confident that the design controls will require that for the areas that do have kind of over street elements. But Commissioner Cerullo, to your point, the lighting for other areas is also really critically important. The design controls do speak to really important things like transparency, and really trying to ensure that the bus terminal, unlike the conditions today where you've got a lot of blank wall conditions, that you have transparency, you have animation, which also includes lighting kind of bleeding out from the facility onto the street to provide that, more welcoming environment. But very much note your comment about the obstructions that come with light poles and the like, so.
I would agree, Eric, but I also, just like you have some of the design controls being depicted here, I think that maybe those other design controls should be depicted so we can understand the full picture.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know where they're going to, you have a design control, and we know that it's a design control, but where is it going to be? Where is it going to be placed? How is it going to look? We don't know that yet.
Yeah.
So it would be beneficial to the applicant to really produce those type of drawings.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead, Commissioner Osorio.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks again so much for all the work and all of the facilitation here and the explanation of addressing our questions, basically. I have two questions for you. I want to know if the department feels comfortable with the width of the sidewalks on 39 and 40th. I know that sometimes the renderings show significantly wider sidewalks, and I want to make sure that, the actual sort of like width and the changes in width are something that you're comfortable with? That's the first question.
Yep. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. We're very paying very close attention to the widths of sidewalks, and we get those details in the site plans. Definitely, the renderings are not always exact of what is expected to be built. They sometimes can be very favorable, but we worked closely with the applicant on the site plan through the application process, and most, if not all, let me just say most sidewalks are wider than the existing conditions that are there today, so we are achieving better. On this rendering, which is true, we are removing a vehicle travel lane. It's parking, which is on the north side of 40th Street. So in the future project, that lane of parking will be removed. There's a single travel lane in the middle, and then there will still be parking or commercial loading sites on the south side of 40th Street. At the end of this street, the sidewalk will pull back a bit because there has to be a left lane turn for vehicles that are taking a left north on 8th Avenue. But, yeah, so, this is a much improved condition. And then I think you called out specifically 39th Street, which is also a much improved condition. That one is achieved by, pulling, right now there's a blank wall of ramps, and the future storage and staging site is pulled back. So we create a wider sidewalk with the new building.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And just to sort of like be fair also, I think that only a few of the renderings have been updated. So, thanks for your clarification. You've answered my question. The second question is, or do you want to add something?
Yes, sorry. No. Just looking at this particular image here, the intersection of 9th and 4th, if you recall some of the plans that we were showing that show different scenarios for how this particular frontage could possibly be reconfigured, one of the things that we put forward for the commission to consider is the possibility of an additional sidewalk widening here at this particular intersection where the lobby entrances meet the sidewalk, just because of the obstructions that are present, bollards, tree pits, light poles. So we do think this is one area where the sidewalk condition could be further improved with a widening. What you saw on the plan was a 10-foot widening, just limited to a certain distance within the intersection.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that, and I agree. They go together. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
the other question is about the open spaces, and I'm wondering if, I just want to understand whether the department feels comfortable with the status of the conversation right now in terms of, how much detail can we actually sort of formalize right now in terms of what to expect down the path, just to make sure that at the end of the day the community has clear expectations in terms of what's going to happen with those open spaces in the interim.
I'm not seeing any of my colleagues helping me with this answer. We believe that the department believes, not just us, but the department believes that the Port Authority is committed to those open spaces. And I would say that we agree with the Port Authority. It may not make sense to design the open spaces now because since they won't be built for 10 years, for them to do community engagement now and then it be built at a much later date does not make sense. I think, we have discussed on how we could have a commitment to that process. And I know that the community board and the borough president also requested that there be a commitment to a process that includes community engagement. I think we are still discussing on how we could potentially formalize that, and we would like that, but yeah, we're still discussing.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate what you said, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. This is a question that is, for the department, really, and so I would love to just continue that, specifically because I agree with you. I mean, what I sense is, and also to what you said, there's a lack of clarity. And I feel that it's just important to understand exactly what we're talking about. Even at the public hearing, there were some comments connecting the open spaces with mitigation, but disconnecting the open spaces with mitigation actions. And I feel that given how clear the community board was in terms of, their requests, I feel we, the CPC, hopefully can provide some help in terms of making sure that there's a very, very clear understanding of where we stand.
Agreed. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
And I think just to clarify the point that the community board was making, it is a mitigation of the environmental review process because of the addition of the office towers and the increase in the bus terminal. It is expected that there should be an increase in open space to sort of meet that demand. And so that's when they say it's a mitigation, they're tying it to the environmental review. It is less attached to the ULURP actions and the zoning actions requested, but no, good point. Just wanted to clarify.
You mean it will be defined later once we look into detail analyze the towers per se?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me go to Commissioner Benjamin.
I didn't have my hand up.
I just, it's just like on my reflex here. No, I thought I saw you. It's
Well,
all good. Let me go.
I'm certainly happy to say that.
I thought I saw you raise your hand as well, too, yeah.
No, I was just holding my head, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But everybody's done a great job, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Mann.
Yeah, just a quick question on the overstreet design elements. I know we talked at the pre-hearing about some of the changes made on 39th Street and some of the transparency that's created in terms of the evolution of the Port Authority design, or 10th Avenue, perhaps. I'm getting the streets wrong.
Sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. If we just go back a couple of slides to show maybe the overstreet design for the ramps, yeah. So my understanding, and I'm coming to this a little bit late in the game, was that this was a modification, or at least a clarification the Port Authority is making to their design of the overstreet.
This was an updated rendering
Right.
they gave us from certification.
Yep.
So we only had, say, gray boxes that
Yep.
showed the relative
Right.
overstreet elements. We're showing this is the only rendering they provided of the overstreet elements. And, the urban design controls focus on lighting, visual expression, mechanical screening. Right. And so we are modifying the urban design controls so that mechanical screening also applies to any equipment that would be on the underside of the bridges
Right.
as well.
So I think my question just on the other street design elements, has there been any additional design work done to clarify whether the gray boxes will be gray boxes in terms of bulk?
We have not received them yet from the Port Authority.
Got it, but you're hoping that they will come back on that. And then, just on the zoning controls, have you thought about some kind of transparency requirement in section for the overstreet building?
I see what you're saying now. That is a good question, Commissioner. I think I might have tried to explain this at the pre-hearing. So these are bridges.
Yep.
The other parts are really actually extensions of the building over the street. So there are going to be gates. We've been less concerned, I suppose, with transparency on those. I mean, we want to see the final design of them. When we meant transparency for the overstreet building elements, this particular view, the 10th Avenue bridges, were unenclosed specifically to allow, because there's so many of them, to allow more light and air on this corridor. So we do think it's achieved on this bridge, these bridging elements.
Right, but I guess, so then just two follow-ups there. Have we thought about adding it as a streetscape design element? So we've got lighting, visual expression, which presumably could cover things like transparency, mechanical screening. So I'm just curious there if there was a thought about just ensuring that level of, access to light, sky was part of the final design.
I think that's a good consideration, and we'll take it back and discuss. I think the visual expression, we are thinking about, if it does have to be a building and it can't be transparent, ways that we could add artwork or details in the building facade to kind of make it more interesting from the sidewalk experience. But yeah, do it.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'll also just add that for the overstreet building elements, part of our consideration for light and air has also been to demap a specific volume of airspace so that we can guarantee that in the areas where the port does have to sort of extend the building in order to build out some of the ramps, it's not unduly affecting the light and air. So with the urban design controls that we have, plus the volume controls and the demapping, we feel like it offers enough flexibility for the port to construct as needed for these ramp structures, but also allows that flexibility in visual expression as well.
Yeah, no, understood. And I'm, I haven't built too many large bus stations of this scale, so I can imagine the challenges Port Authority has in doing this kind of work. I just was curious if there'd been any additional exploration of what that transparency requirement might look like here to make sure these renderings actually feel real, and also then if there's any additional design evolution, it'd be great to see it for the other overstreet design elements. So thanks for that.
And just looking, reading the text right now in visual expression, one of the potential ideas as transparent elements to allow visibility of bus movements. So that might speak to the transparency element.
Although, not sure the community wants to see buses.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Okay, all right, we will pick this up again. Thank you very much for this this report. Okay, Sarah, let's talk about what's next.
Okay. Our last review session item, future votes for today's special public meeting, 962 and 972 Franklin Avenue rezoning, which had a public hearing at the August 7th public meeting. There was additional public comments and testimonies in your weekend materials, and Josh is here to present.
Okay, welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here to follow up on the recent post hearings on the 962 Franklin rezoning application. Next slide, please. And apologies, I know we've been through this a lot, but just want to remind you of the specific angles and heights just because we're looking at a lot of different alternatives here. So the applicant's A application proposing a text amendment to establish an inclined height limiting plane would start at 85 feet and rise at an angle of 26.83 degrees. The full floor area and units of the original R8A proposal would fit into this envelope and would reduce but not mitigate shadow impacts on both Brooklyn Botanic Gardens and Jackie Robinson Playground. Even partial mitigations are not possible for BBG under this proposal. Next slide, please. So the department, in coordination with Parks Department, reviewed 3 alternatives for potential modifications, the 3 alternatives I mentioned when I was here 2 weeks ago. These modifications would be to both the proposed zoning district and to the angle of the A-text plane. All the alternatives were included in the alternatives chapter of the FEIS, which was issued on September 12th. In evaluating these alternatives, we weighed the number of units produced, including MIH, with the reduction and location of incremental shadows on the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens. While these daily reductions in increment may seem small, BBG has shared that how a small daily reduction in aggregate over the year makes a difference for their sensitive collections that need full year-round sun. Next slide, please. So first we're going to look at the R7X alternative with a reduced angle of 17 degrees. This would produce about 385 units. This alternative reduces the shadow from the applicant's R8A A-text by an average of about 15 minutes. The longest shadows are on resources P and U, the Hardy Plant Nursery Yard and New York Native Propagation Tunnel, which are 51 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes, with the rest of the shadows around a half hour. Next slide, please. Moving on to the R7D alternative at an angle of 15 degrees. We would see 355 units here, and this would further reduce shadows, with all shadows below a half hour, except on those resources P and U, the outdoor Hardy Nursery Yard and Native New York Tunnel. And that's 47 minutes and an hour and 9 minutes on those 2 resources. Next slide, please. And lastly, for the R7A alternative, with a reduced angle down to 10 degrees, this would produce around 319 units. Shadows would range around 20 minutes on the P through V resources, except for P and U, again, which range from 42 minutes and an hour and 6 minutes. Next slide, please. I also want to compare these alternatives to the existing R6A district and what that could look like under the housing opportunity proposal, which with UAP could see buildings reaching up to 130 feet, inclusive of bulkheads. An R6A UAP building would have a shadow increments of up to an hour and 50 minutes, with an hour or more on the rest of these resources. This alternative, despite the longer shadows, would only produce about 230 units due to the lower FAR. Next slide, please. So here we're looking at the R7D 15-degree alternatives shadow increments on the June 21 analysis day. From the start of the analysis period on the left to 6:30 a.m. seen here on the right. This graphic illustrates that the remaining shadows at 6:30 would only remain on resources P and U, which again are the outdoor Hardy Plant Nursery Yard and the New York Native Propagation Tunnel. These back-of-house areas have more room to mitigate impacts, unlike the glass pavilions of the conservatories or the workshops, and shadows would be fully removed from resources A through O, including the conservatories on the June 21st analysis day under the R7D 15-degree slope. Next slide, please. So after factoring in the maximum number of units, including MIH, with the shortest shadow increment, the department is pleased to recommend that the CPC modify both the zoning text amendment from R8A to R7D and modify the angle of the A text height limiting plane from 26.83 degrees down to 15 degrees. The department supports this modification, which does not cast shadows on any of the conservatories, the longest shadows on the outdoor Hardy Plant Nursery Yard and New York Native Propagation Tunnel, making it a partially mitigable impact. The applicant has entered into a restrictive declaration to fund mitigations to these resources. The department is thrilled this modification also reduces shadows on Jackie Robinson Playground, which paired with mitigations would also be partially mitigable. Furthermore, this would reclaim underutilized land with access to transit while expanding access to income-restricted housing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Josh. And thank you for all of your efforts with this. I know I said it before, but this was a complicated one. We really appreciate you and the team and everything you did here. Okay, let me go to Commissioner Goodrich.
I just want to clarify. So instead of the original proposal, which was 4 hours, I think it was, what is the difference between how much it would, because I'm a little confused by the graphs. So the original proposal, the shadows would have been how long? And then this proposal, is it less than, is it however that is minus an hour and 15, or it's just that it would only be impacted for an hour and 15? Or is it that it wouldn't be impacted at all?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner. If we could just pull up the table too. So the times that table is showing are the entire increment of the shadow from the alternative or the original proposed development. This is not the reduction from the proposed development. So this is, for example, the R7D on the bottom, the Mediterranean Display Plants Tunnel. That shadow on June 21st in the morning would only be 21 minutes, that increment.
And then so under the new proposal, but then under the original, how much would it have been?
50 of the step-down A text.
Okay, so it's limited by about half.
It depends on the resource. The main thing I think to highlight here is just that where the longest shadows do still exist, it's on resources like the outdoor Hardy Nursery Yard and the New York Native Collection Propagation Tunnel, where unlike the conservatories that are, in glass pavilions, they have a little more flexibility to combine with partial mitigations here, which wasn't possible under the previous alternative.
Okay, so under the new proposal, there's still, I guess which we originally discussed, there isn't going to be any way that any building, even if it was 1 story high, isn't going to cast a shadow, right? Is that my understanding? So either way, a proposal here is going to impact the garden.
That there would still be an partially mitigable significant adverse impact with regards to shadows. But compared to the potential as of right, that could be likely longer shadow increments.
And then my last question is this still the affordability measure? Is still the same, which was the original was like $3,000 for a studio? It was $3,030 for a studio. Is that still the same?
The applicant has not changed the MIH options that they're pursuing. This alternative would give us about 355 units, of which 89 would be income restricted pursuant to MIH, but they have not modified the shadows. The options.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gold.
Just on the mitigations page, I just want to understand there, it's headline DCP recommendations. And then we talk about these are potential mitigations, or these are mitigations that have been discussed with the applicant or with the gardener, or what are they exactly?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So these are mitigations proposed by BBG and Parks Department. We've been working with both of them closely. The applicant entered into a restrictive declaration, which is executed today, committing funding to mitigations that can include HVAC, upgrade lighting, improving the structures for those remaining impacted resources.
So there's ongoing, I guess, when both sides, or when BBG anyway, was in front of us, they hadn't really had discussions with the applicants. At this point, they're looking at some things that could mitigate this impact, and the applicant is amenable to helping with that. Is that a correct understanding?
That's correct. These mitigations came from BBG. They proposed them, worked with City Planning and Parks Department, and the applicant has signed on to the restrictive declaration committing to funding them.
We've facilitated compromise here, I think, or the department has.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you again, Josh. Thank you very much for everything you've done here. Sarah, let's talk about our next step. Anything else for our review session now before we move on to our special public meeting?
There are no other items for the review session, Chair.
Okay, so we're going to close the review session and let us open our special public meeting of the City Planning Commission of today, which is still September the 23rd. Madam Secretary.
Okay. Good afternoon. This is City Planning Commission's special public meeting held remotely through the NYC Engage portal and in person in the CPC hearing room, 120 Broadway, Lower Concourse. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024. I will now call the roll. Chair Garodnick.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles is absent. Commissioner Benjamin.
Present.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Crowell.
Present.
Commissioner Dueck.
Here.
Commissioner Gold.
Here.
Commissioner Goodrich.
Here.
Commissioner Kamani. Here. Commissioner Mann.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Osorio.
Here.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the reports section on page 4. Reports. Borough Brooklyn, calendar numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. 962, 972 Franklin Avenue rezoning. CD 9. Calendar number 1, C 230356ZMK. Calendar number 2, N 230357ZRK has been withdrawn. Calendar number 3, N 230357AZRK. Calendar number 4, C 230358ZSK. And the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments and special permit concerning 962, 972 Franklin Avenue rezoning. For favorable reports as modified on calendar numbers 1 and 3, and a favorable report on calendar number 4. Chair Garodnick.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Before I vote aye, I just wanted to make one quick note. This has certainly been one of the most debated private applications to come before the City Planning Commission in years, and for good reason. It calls out the need to balance an opportunity for new housing in the midst of a generational housing shortage and the protection of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, one of the jewels of the borough. With the modifications that the DCP team laid out and is recommending to the Commission, I am confident that we have achieved an appropriate balance. The height limitation plane that has been proposed would minimize the shadows that this development would create on the garden to the point that these plants will receive only minutes rather than hours of shade during the day. With this change, we can guarantee that the garden will thrive far into the future while also creating the housing this community needs. I want to thank the dedicated team at the Department of City Planning, our partners across the city, especially at the Parks Department, the applicant team, and the garden themselves for their collaboration as we worked to achieve our shared goals. And with that, I vote aye.
Commissioner Benjamin. Aye. Commissioner Cerullo.
I'd just like to associate myself with the remarks of our chair, and I vote aye.
Commissioner Crowell.
I similarly would like to associate myself with the remarks of the chair and commend the department for extraordinary work. This is incredibly difficult, an incredibly difficult situation that I appreciate the level of attention and work with the developer and a great result. Thank you. I vote aye.
Commissioner Dueck.
Aye.
Commissioner Gold.
I would echo the chair's comments and also note good credit for the department in finding a compromise here. So vote aye.
Commissioner Goodrich.
So I am pleased to hear that there, after a lot of the work of DCP, that there is a compromise here that works. It may work, it sounds like, for the garden. I want to also iterate that I found it to be interesting that it took scores of people, hours of hearing for that compromise to happen, and in fact for DCP to kind of be the intermediary to push for that to happen. I would like for going forward, this is just an ideal for developers to take seriously community engagement and not need commission or DCP to sort of be this intermediary. As many of you know, if this project, forget the garden aspect, I'm very happy that there has been this compromise, and that's great, but the affordability part really has been a sticking point for me. I find that for the income restricted rate for over $3,000 for a studio is just an abhorrent amount. And I am tired of these kinds of proposals coming through and people, you know, acting like this is something that we're supposed to be happy about. I also I'm voting no, let me just skip to that part, but let me just also add that to sum up, I don't like the way that when this proposal came out, this is not, it's nothing to do with the DCP or anything, just the way that it was framed, even spoken about, like in the public, housing versus green spaces. I understand that we all know that there's a housing crunch, but we also see from a policy standpoint that it is forcing people to make this sort of decision that green spaces are not important, and we see that happening throughout the city. And I think that this is why this particular proposal really had a lot of people coming to testify, because that's happening across the city. So I'm happy that there was a compromise, but that's one part, one aspect and angle of the proposal. The affordability part is also the bigger issue, and for that, as you all know, I vote no on these very high income restricted rates. So I'm voting no on that.
Commissioner Kermani.
So I'll start with I'm voting yes, and also associate myself with the chair's comments and Commissioner Goodrich's comments. This was probably the hardest decision, hardest vote for me to make, and I think the concern ultimately was, if not this proposal, then what happens if it's as of right? And ultimately, I think for me that was the bar that pushed it over, and it's a hard choice to make. I'm deeply appreciative of the department and all the work that has gone on to negotiate and to get to this place. So deep gratitude for that, and this is a really tough one.
Commissioner Mann.
Yeah, I just want to thank the department as well, and the Parks Department as well for trying to be honest brokers in a difficult conversation, and I vote aye.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Osorio.
I really appreciate the work of the different DCP teams, particularly of the Brooklyn office, in really working within the time constraints to analyze all of the different alternative scenarios. But despite the proposed reduction, I vote no, agreeing with the comments of the Borough President on number 1, concerns around the shadow impacts on such sensitive receptors. Number 2, the use of a solar plane as a precedent that can be seen as arbitrary and is detrimental to the consistency of the review process. And 3, I agree with Commissioner Goodrich. This is a community where we need deeper affordability. Thank you.
Commissioner Rampershad.
Yeah, this has been a tough one. It's probably the second toughest since the borough-based jails. I struggled with this one prior to the compromise that was reached. I was 100% no on it because I didn't agree that a 14-story building should go here. But I've been going back and forth even up until this moment, but I prefer to see the R7A here. And I do also want to thank the DCP, the agency, for all the hard work and efforts they put through to get this, to see this compromise happen, but I'm going to vote no on this one. Thank you.
Favorable reports have been adopted as modified on calendar numbers 1 and 3, and a favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 4.
Great. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, any other business for us today?
No, Chair Garadnick, there is no other business before the commission.
Any more announcements?
No, Chair Garadnick.
Okay. Just checking. With that, thank you all. We will see you on Wednesday, and we're adjourned.
The time is 3:52 p.m.